appreciate it. I know we're coming up to the end of the agenda, so I promise I will be as quick as possible. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the health effects and things like that because you've heard about it already. But I do think it's important to have a little bit of context about the type of policy accomplishments that we've already made. And let me again sort of back up and let you know. So I'm Cynthia Hallett. I have been with Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights and the A&R Foundation for the last 20 years. And I actually started off at the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services. And I guess my UC affiliation is I got my MPH from UCLA. But at A&R, we have been very fortunate. We've been around since 1976, and we started before there was a lot of data about the health effects of secondhand smoke. And over the course of the last 4 decades, have really benefited from our colleagues in the research community. So first of all, thank you for all of your research, because it's really helped our policy advocacy efforts to move faster, and with that justification of why we're doing it. So in fact, all this discussion about particulate matter was incredibly important in the 1990s as we started to get some of these indoor air quality studies to really give policymakers and the public a visual description of the dirty air in, say, a smoke-filled bar. And you know, with workplaces and restaurants, it wasn't quite as hard to make the sale that it should go 100% smoke-free. But with bars and now with casinos, the perception is, well, everybody who drinks smokes, or certainly everybody who gambles smokes. And first of all, that's not true. And second of all, even if that were the case, we've still got very, very dirty air. So just to start with a little bit of background, as we were talking about the legalization of marijuana, this is a map which basically tells you now that 26 states and the District of Columbia currently have laws legalizing marijuana, whether it's medicinal or recreational, or 7 states plus DC are recreational, 26 in DC have medical. So you know, that's a lot of places now. So this is really an issue where we as an advocacy organization, actually since about 2006, started getting phone calls from people saying, hey, I'm smelling smoke, but it's not tobacco smoke. What do you know about it, and what can we do about it? Well, just to give you a quick picture of where we are now and our concerns about the legalization of marijuana, in fact, actually undermining and being a threat to our current smoke-free protections. This is the map that currently shows the states and the municipalities, whether they be cities or counties, that have 100% smoke-free workplace, restaurant, and bar provisions. Kind of the, I'll call it the gold standard. And so the good news is that 58% of the US population is protected by one of those strong laws. The converse is 42% are not. So we've got 42% of the US population that's still exposed to secondhand smoke in a workplace, restaurant, or bar. Also, with casinos proliferating, there are now only 2 states that do not have any form of gambling. Some only have lottery, but many states now have Vegas-like casinos, and 90% of casino workers, whether it be commercial casinos or like here in California, tribal casinos, are not protected from exposure to secondhand smoke. So this is an issue for us. Just recommendations with respect to not only controlling exposure to secondhand smoke, but also looking at the secondhand aerosol from electronic smoking devices, as well as secondhand marijuana. We have, oh gosh, now I have to take out my glasses. We have recommendations from 2 organizations. One that's important, I think, is ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Ventilation, and Air Conditioning Engineers. I actually used to go to those meetings. I am not, you know, a ventilation engineer, but at the time, tobacco companies were attending these meetings for the standard 62.1, trying to get separate standards for the hospitality industry, because clearly secondhand smoke is different in a restaurant or a bar or casino, right? Wrong. In any event, not only did ASHRAE base their standard for acceptable indoor air quality on a completely tobacco smoke-free environment, it was recently strengthened to be based on marijuana-free and also free of the secondhand aerosol from electronic cigarettes, based on the fact that all 3 of those items produce particulate matter, which could therefore be hazardous to public health. And the other one was, I can't remember now if it's NIOSH or which group, I can't see it, it's too small. But again, it also recognizes that at a minimum, we need to establish and maintain smoke-free workplaces, and also have that include electronic smoking devices. So where are we now? The good news is for the most part, there's about 204 municipalities and 7 states that actually include marijuana use in their smoke-free laws. So basically, it's prohibited from use in otherwise smoke-free environments. At the A&R Foundation, we do have a laws database that looks at local and state laws. Right now, all I can say is that it controls for marijuana in some sort of smoke-free environment. We're going to go back and reanalyze those laws to determine how specifically they relate. So it could be smoke-free workplaces and bars, it could be smoke-free parks, it could be smoke-free schools, also then would prohibit the use of marijuana in those environments. Per the California law, even the medical marijuana law, and recently with Prop 64, you are not supposed to use marijuana in places where you are not supposed to use tobacco. However, we have seen in states like Colorado, where they had a very strong smoke-free workplace law, that now they are having threats to that with respect to marijuana. In Denver, there was a ballot initiative in November, which has now allowed for marijuana use in special marijuana clubs. Now, those are still going to be workplaces, and so we are lucky that a bill at the Colorado state legislature just recently failed, but in Denver, they now have the marijuana clubs, and they are trying to do that in Alaska as well. So just to go very, very quickly, I wanted to, and here we go. So here's the map where those laws, smoke-free laws, also prohibit the use of marijuana. We have a variety of resources. I left some of these fact sheets out there, in particular this recent position paper about protecting non-smokers from exposure to secondhand marijuana smoke. We have heard from some of the other folks in the anti-legalization of marijuana community that they're very focused on individual health and kind of to work with them to also recognize the importance of the public health exposure to secondhand marijuana. And just quickly to back up as well, with respect to electronic cigarettes, there are currently over 600 municipalities that also prohibit the use of electronic smoking devices in smoke-free environments, and 12 states. So there is a trend towards including all of these products, whether it's cigarettes, cigars, electronic smoking devices, and now marijuana. But we still have some concerns because we know that the marijuana industry has publicly said, we want every adult to have access to marijuana much like they do to alcohol. So I will leave that there. This is my contact information if you would like more information. I will say that we have seen the greatest success with respect to smoke-free laws at the local level. And given the current political environment at the state and federal level, we are still very focused on working at the local level. That doesn't mean we shouldn't discuss now with the panel what the possibilities could be for regulating indoor, and I'll also suggest outdoor smoking. But again, we may need to, start local, and then we'll work towards state and federal legislation in the future, perhaps. Thank you. I think these slides are going to be accessible to all of you, and there are more slides, but I just wanted to give a little bit of background as to what current policies are out there now.
Thank you, Cynthia. Given the hour, so Julia.
I have a question for Cynthia, which is, you mentioned the marijuana industry, and it just made me wonder whether there was any, inroads by big tobacco into the marijuana industry, or is it still...
Well, we're beginning to see, first of all, we're seeing some very similar patterns, and again, in this position paper, you'll see what some of those are, but they've taken a lot of pages out of the tobacco industry playbook in terms of, we want to self-regulate. In Colorado, in Alaska, and I believe also in Oregon, but I could be wrong there, at least in Colorado and Alaska, marijuana industry representatives are on the regulatory boards. And that's a big no-no. I mean, the industry should not be part of setting up the regulatory standards. And it's created a lot of problems, particularly in Alaska. We've also been seeing a lot of advertising for marijuana as if it is safe, because of course, you heard earlier, it's natural, and so therefore it must be great. So we're getting a lot of the same types of behaviors. I have not seen any direct affiliation between the tobacco industry and the marijuana industry, although there are some of the same sort of bad actors that are getting engaged. And when you think about the electronic smoking device industry, we are beginning to see a lot of the same. We need to be exempted from laws, we're different. and so on. So that's sort of another whole lecture there, but there is a lot of similarities, and follow the money is my first recommendation.
Thank you, Cynthia.